If tomorrow a major conflict cut off supply lines, how many days could you go without the medications you and your family need to survive? For millions of Americans, that's not a hypothetical question. According to the American Medical Association, more than 30% of the population has already experienced trouble getting essential prescriptions, and the Sun reports that roughly 5% live in what's known as pharmacy deserts, areas where the nearest pharmacy can be dozens of miles away. Now add in the possibility of a global crisis, a war, or even a limited nuclear exchange disrupting trade and logistics, and the question becomes urgent. What would you do if the pharmacy closed tomorrow and didn't reopen for weeks? Right now, the United States is experiencing the highest level of drug shortages in nearly a decade. Pharmacy Times reported in mid-2024 that 323 drugs were officially listed as in shortage, from basic antibiotics to life-saving treatments like insulin. These shortages aren't just the result of increased demand. Much of our pharmaceutical supply chain is concentrated overseas, especially in China and India, and tensions in those regions, whether from trade disputes, military confrontations, or even natural disasters, can disrupt shipments within days. And here's the part many people misunderstand. Whenever I talk about preparing your own medical supplies, someone inevitably says, if a nuclear war happens, no stash of pills will save you. And in one narrow sense, if we're talking about being at the epicenter of a nuclear detonation, that's true, nothing will. But history shows that in even the worst conflicts, the vast majority of people are not killed in the initial strike. They survive the first impact, and then face weeks or months of chaos, with hospitals overloaded, pharmacies empty, and supply lines broken. That's where preparation makes the difference. In this video, we're going to break down how to legally and safely prepare your medicine and health supplies so that you're not scrambling when it's already too late. To understand why this matters, you have to look at what's happening right now. The AMA and Reuters have documented how our pharmaceutical supply chain is vulnerable at every step. Many active pharmaceutical ingredients, what actually makes a medicine work, come from a handful of manufacturing hubs overseas. If those hubs shut down, whether from political sanctions, war, or something as simple as a port strike, there's no easy backup. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how quickly shelves can go bare, but even without a pandemic, we've seen antibiotics for children run out in the middle of flu season, diabetes patients unable to find their specific brand of insulin, and cancer treatments delayed because a single factory had to close. The term pharmacy desert might sound like policy jargon, but here's what it means in human terms. In rural areas, and increasingly in parts of urban America, a pharmacy might be 40, 50, even 60 miles away. If that pharmacy is out of stock, you might be looking at a 100-mile round trip just to hear the same answer from the next store. Now imagine trying to do that during a fuel shortage or after a cyber attack knocks out electronic payment systems. The connection to geopolitics is direct. In a global conflict, supply chains aren't just slowed, they can be severed. When the war in Ukraine began in 2022, local pharmacies were open one day and empty the next. Some medicines never came back in stock for months. That's the reality you prepare for. So how do you build a medicine kit that actually works in a crisis? First, you have to separate prescription medications from over-the-counter or OTC medicines. For prescription drugs you take regularly, things like blood pressure medication, asthma inhalers, thyroid pills, you can legally request what's called an extended supply from your doctor or insurance provider. According to the FDA, many states and insurers allow up to a 90-day supply if you explain that you're preparing for emergencies. You might not get 3 months on the first request, but even having a backup of 2 or 3 weeks can bridge the gap during a shortage. With over-the-counter drugs, the key is to think in categories, not brands. You'll want pain relievers in both acetaminophen and ibuprofen form because they work differently and can be alternated for better relief. Antihistamines like loratadine or diphenhydramine can treat both allergies and mild allergic reactions. Oral rehydration salts, which the World Health Organization recommends for dehydration from illness, can be bought ready-made or mixed at home with salt, sugar, and clean water. Antibiotic ointments, antiseptic wipes, and a digital thermometer round out the basics. The mistake most people make is hoarding a random pile of pills without a plan. Medicines expire, and storing large quantities without rotation means you could end up with a box of useless tablets when you need them most. Instead, follow a rotation system, use the oldest stock first, replace it regularly, and keep everything labeled with expiration dates. One of the most underestimated challenges in medical preparedness is keeping what's called the cold chain intact. The cold chain is the temperature-controlled supply line that keeps certain medications viable from the moment they leave the factory until they're in your hands. Break that chain, and the drug can lose potency or become completely useless. This isn't just a problem for rare treatments. Millions of Americans depend on cold chain medications every single day. Insulin, some liquid antibiotics, injectable biologics for autoimmune conditions, and certain cancer therapies all require strict temperature ranges. For example, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, most types of insulin need to be stored between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Once removed from refrigeration, they can remain stable at room temperature for up to 28 days. But beyond that, the chemical structure begins to degrade, reducing their effectiveness. That may sound like a generous window until you realize that in a prolonged blackout or grid-down situation, your kitchen refrigerator stops being an option almost immediately. Food safety guidelines tell us that a closed fridge keeps a safe temperature for about 4 hours without power. After that, the internal temperature rises quickly, and the same applies to your medication. This is why serious medical prepping means thinking beyond the kitchen fridge. Portable battery-powered mini refrigerators, many designed for RVs or travel, have become far more affordable and efficient in recent years. A reliable unit paired with a small solar generator can keep insulin cold for weeks, even in summer conditions. Some models draw as little as 40 watts, meaning a modest solar panel kit could keep them running indefinitely in good weather. For shorter-term emergencies, say a 48-hour outage, gel packs and insulated coolers can buy you time. But here's the catch. You need a plan to refreeze those packs. Without a backup freezer source, they're only a one-time solution. This is where creative redundancy matters. Some preppers keep a small secondary freezer in their garage connected to a dedicated battery backup, ensuring a frozen supply of gel packs or ice bricks that can be rotated into use as needed. The stakes couldn't be clearer. During Texas's winter storm in February 2021, when the state's power grid collapsed, thousands of patients lost access to temperature-controlled storage within hours. Pharmacies scrambled to give away insulin before it spoiled, but many doses were still lost, forcing patients into dangerous rationing or ER visits. Now imagine that same scenario playing out during a national crisis, when replacement stock might not exist for weeks or months. There would be no emergency delivery trucks coming in from unaffected states because every state would be affected. And here's where the geopolitical connection becomes impossible to ignore. Over 80% of the world's active pharmaceutical ingredients are produced overseas. If global trade is disrupted, whether by war, sanctions, or blockades, your last good vial might be the one already in your refrigerator. If you or someone in your family depends on a refrigerated medication, this isn't an optional part of your plan. It's the difference between life and death. Your cold chain strategy should be as essential as your food storage or water supply plan. And here's a final reality check. While you might think you have time to figure it out later, the people who rode out that Texas blackout without losing their medicine were the ones who had already set up backup systems before the crisis hit. When we talk about medical preparedness, it's easy to focus entirely on prescription bottles and pill organizers. But in a real crisis, survival often comes down to your ability to handle the unexpected medical problems that don't fit neatly into a pharmacy bag. Cuts, burns, broken bones, high fevers. These are the kinds of situations that can escalate from minor to life-threatening in hours if you can't get professional help. And in a large-scale emergency, whether caused by war, a natural disaster, or an infrastructure collapse, hospitals may be inaccessible for days or even weeks. That's why every household needs a first aid capability, not just a first aid kit. The American Red Cross has clear guidelines on what should be in that kit. sterile gauze pads to control bleeding and protect wounds, adhesive bandages in multiple sizes for smaller injuries, antiseptic solution to prevent infection, tweezers for removing debris, medical scissors for cutting tape or clothing, a reliable thermometer, and a manual blood pressure cuff. These aren't luxury items. They're the bare minimum for self-reliance in a medical emergency. For families with specific health conditions, the list expands. If you have a diabetic in the home, a glucometer is non-negotiable. If you care for someone with chronic respiratory issues or live in an area with high wildfire smoke risk, a pulse oximeter can help you monitor oxygen levels and decide when more serious intervention is needed. And for anyone managing ongoing treatment at home, you should have any specialty equipment, like nebulizers or wound care supplies, ready and in working order. The key here is capability, not just inventory. Having the right gear in a closet won't save anyone unless you know how to use it. During the early weeks of the war in Ukraine, many civilians found themselves treating injuries at home because hospitals were overwhelmed or unsafe to reach. Some of those people saved lives because they had taken a basic first aid course. Others lost loved ones because they didn't know how to stop a severe bleed. FEMA and the Red Cross both offer free or low-cost first aid and CPR training, and in many areas you can take them online or in short local workshops. These courses cover everything from recognizing the signs of a stroke or heart attack to properly applying a tourniquet, skills that work in everyday accidents just as much as they do in disaster scenarios. Think of it this way. In a crisis, every minute you can stabilize someone at home reduces the load on emergency services and increases their chance of survival. And here's an often overlooked point. Good medical preparedness also includes maintaining your own health before a crisis. Staying current with vaccinations, managing chronic conditions, and knowing your baseline vitals means you'll be better equipped to spot when something's wrong. In wartime or disaster zones, it's often the combination of injury and untreated illness that becomes deadly. By having the supplies, the skills, and the habit of readiness, you turn your home into a place where survival odds improve, not decline, when the outside world becomes unsafe. All of these steps come together in what I call the family health binder. It sounds simple, and that's exactly the point. This is a low-tech, high-reliability tool that works when everything else fails. Imagine it as the command center for your household's medical readiness. Inside, you should have a clear, up-to-date list of every medication in your home, including the exact name, the dosage, the prescribing doctor, the pharmacy contact, and any relevant medical history such as allergies or past surgeries. If a family member is unconscious or you're communicating with a medic who has never treated them before, this one sheet of paper can save critical minutes and prevent deadly mistakes. Alongside that list include photocopies of all prescriptions, your health insurance cards, and a printed list of emergency contacts, not just friends and family, but also doctors, specialists, and local clinics. Why printed? Because in a grid-down scenario, your phone battery might be dead, your contacts list inaccessible, and your cell signal gone. Paper still works when satellites don't. Storage is just as important as information. Keep your medicines in a cool, dry place, away from direct sunlight and out of reach of children. And here's a key point many overlook. Make sure at least one other responsible adult in your household knows exactly where your supplies are, how they're organized, and how to use them. In a real emergency, you might be the one who's injured or incapacitated. Your plan fails if you're the only person who can execute it. Integrate your health binder into your wider crisis readiness. If you have a bug-out bag, your grab-and-go kit for evacuation, there should be a smaller version of the binder inside it, or at least copies of the essentials. If your family has an emergency communication plan, make sure it notes who is responsible for grabbing the binder if you need to leave home fast. The same applies to evacuation routes. Your medical readiness should travel with you, whether you're heading to a relative's house, a designated shelter, or an improvised safe zone. To make this real, picture the following scenario. It's 2 in the morning and an evacuation order comes over the emergency alert system. You have 5 minutes to leave. In the chaos, you throw clothes in a bag, grab some food, and head out. only to realize halfway down the road that you left your child's inhaler on the kitchen counter and you have no idea when you'll be able to get a replacement. That's the moment you understand the value of a prepared portable medical file. When you've built your binder and trained your household on where it is and how to use it, you eliminate that panic and replace it with action. You don't waste mental bandwidth trying to remember which pharmacy has your last refill or what dosage your spouse takes. You already have it in hand. In a crisis, that's the difference between reacting and surviving. The bottom line is this: emergencies don't announce themselves. The pharmacy can be open today and empty tomorrow. Wars, pandemics, cyber attacks, they all have one thing in common. They disrupt the systems we rely on, and they do it fast. And while the image of a nuclear blast tends to dominate people's fears, the reality is that most of us are far more likely to face the aftermath: shortages, blackouts, and a medical system stretched past its breaking point. In those moments, having the right medicine and supplies isn't paranoia, it's survival. So here's my question for you. If supply lines were cut off tonight, what's the one medication you couldn't live without? Let me know in the comments, because your answer might help someone else realize what they need to prepare for. And if you found this video useful, subscribe. The more we prepare now, the better our chances when the unexpected happens.